Hello and welcome to No Nonsense with Pamela Wallin. Today, a look at what is going on in Ottawa. A new Prime Minister makes his parliamentary debut with plenty of promises on all fronts, and a royal reading of the speech from the throne. What does it mean for us and maybe even for the monarchy? He took the occasion, King Charles did, to remind us that the true north is strong and free. So we'll get some views on who that message was directed at. So joining us today, Admiral Mark Norman, our regular, Margaret McCuaig-Johnston, our regular. Tasha couldn't be with us, so we have invited back to join us Heather Exner-Pirot. She was just here a couple of weeks ago talking all things energy, senior fellow at the MLI, Macdonald Laurier Institute, and she will have her comments on that topic. Welcome to you all. Good to see you. So let's just do round one on what you made of it all and the quick trip by the King and Queen. There was a lot of hubbub in Ottawa. Did it spread out across the country? Margaret, what do you think?
Well, I thought it was a big success. I was really pleased that it went so well. There were no
Mm.
glitches at all, which is astounding given the complexity of these kinds of events.
Yeah,
Even the weather was perfect,
yeah,
and I think it was great on a high level scale. It was also great in the details of the signals that were sent. Some of the passages in the speech from the throne that were important policy messages, urgency messages, messages to Donald Trump. I think those Canadians who participated, some coming from across the country, really thought it was fantastic. Whether, the farmer in Saskatchewan was paying attention,
yeah.
we'll see. But I think overall, it did the job that the Prime Minister wanted, which was to turn the page on the Trudeau government.
Yeah.
And so I think it certainly did that, and it has started this new parliament off with a high degree of urgency.
Now, Mark, you are at the CanSec conference. This is the gathering of big defense companies and people involved in military procurement, and quite an interesting group. Lots of stuff in the throne speech, which we'll come back to on that. But what was your take? Was there any ripples through the room yesterday?
I agree with what Margaret just said. I think it was mission accomplished.
Yeah.
I think the signaling was entirely on target, to use a military term, and I don't think the Prime Minister could have been more successful in terms of how he wanted to kick off his tenure. And so now, to put it bluntly, the hard work starts,
Yeah.
and this is where I think we'll dig into a few things that are going to be challenging in the next several months or few years.
That was kind of the assessment too, Heather, that the bar, he has set the bar very high on a lot of issues, but just your reaction as part of the younger set looking at this.
You're too kind, Pamela. Out west, probably obviously didn't garner as much attention as it would in central Canada, but still was very, I think the feeling was very positive. The image was very positive, regardless of your political leanings. This was an impressive bit of statecraft on
Yeah.
Carney's part to get that pomp and circumstance to open it up in that way, to show, as a world leader on the global stage. And the throne speech I thought was pretty good, and I was pleased to hear, King Charles have to talk about conventional energy. So all in all, I thought it was a pretty good show.
Yeah, it's always a little weird when they're reading tax announcements, and we are going to, and but I thought they did a great job, and he and the Queen were actually in very good form. I got to have a few little exchanges with both of them. I've met them both before, and they love being here. It is really, that's a really obvious thing. This is good. I think the King has been here. This is his 20th visit, but is his first as king. So, Margaret, just on the whole question of expectations, you have been in government over the years where you, as a member of the civil service, are trying to prep for a throne speech, a new prime minister, right out of an election, then the royals attending and reading. There's an awful lot of work in very compressed time. Is it doable?
Well, it's a huge agenda. My one of my previous lives, I was in machinery of government, part of the Privy Council office, and
Yeah.
my responsibility was to advise on the cabinet committee structure, the members of the cabinet committee, mandate letters. And so, I was watching that very closely. The PM's got a huge job because he not only chairs cabinet, he chairs 3 cabinet committees. Priorities and Planning, the National Security Council, and the Incidents Response Group. And those are all appropriate for the Prime Minister. The mandate letters to me,
Letter, singular this time, yeah. One
was,
size fits all to all
yes,
ministers. Here's
it,
what we're doing.
it was a disappointment to me. And the reason is that yes, it gave the high level so everybody's on the same page and 7 broad priorities. At the same time, mandate letters aren't just for the ministers. They're to map out how the government is going to implement the campaign promises.
Yep.
And even more importantly, holding the bureaucrats to account for delivering to the minister the options and the program implementation that has been identified. And so we have nothing on that in the mandate letter. That's going to come. The budget now for the fall, I think it means that cabinet should be meeting every week through the summer, in my view, to reflect the Prime Minister's note of urgency. Parliament should be meeting more than just a couple of weeks in June. Yeah. And they have to get with the program. This is urgent and it's huge. It's not just a big financial agenda, it's a huge financial agenda. He's talked about the budget in September. That means it's really being drafted now.
Yeah.
And in fact, if the Prime Minister had decided to have the budget as soon as this campaign was over, Department of Finance would have been ready for that. They already would have had all their inputs.
So you're suggesting he was signaling, I'm not going to do it now, I'm going to do it later.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he could have done a fiscal update, and I think he should have, because we don't know in detail what the books look like. He does. We would have gotten briefed on that. It's 62 billion this fiscal year in deficit. When Chrétien and Paul Martin slagged the deficit back in 1995-96, it was only 42 billion. And downloaded a lot of that to the provinces. The Prime Minister says they're not going to do that. There are massive commitments in the campaign and again in the speech from the throne. So the budget's going to be big, big, big.
Well, and the other question, Margaret, is that the Prime Minister quietly canceling or reducing the tariffs in the middle of the campaign on U.S. goods, that was a $20 billion, chunk of change on funding what he's now up to, and that's disappeared. So we'll have to, that changes it all.
Yeah, and so I don't know where he's going to get the money to do all these things. I think, I do agree with his approach of looking at the investment commitments versus the operations of government. But if I were a department that's not on the main radar of the agenda, as you see in the mandate letter or the high-level commitments in the speech from the throne, I'd be very worried about what cuts are going to come to my budget.
And he now represents, of course, a riding filled with civil servants, so he might be hearing about that. Mark, let me go to you on some of this expenditure. Of course, we heard from Donald Trump again that they have had discussions, he and the Prime Minister, about the big golden dome, and if Canada would just be the 51st state, they would get under that dome for free. Otherwise, it'll cost us $61 billion. Do you think the Prime Minister's just humoring him by saying, yes, we're talking about that? Or do you think it's for real? And what is your view of that as a notion? Is it strategic or not?
Well, I would like to think that the Prime Minister is serious about Canada's participation in this. But for your viewers and listeners, I mean, what we're talking about here is a system of systems that is designed to protect continental United States and by extension, Canada. It is in our interest to be part of it. It is in the Americans' interest that we be part of it. And so notwithstanding the yet another example of the transactional deal maker trying to make a good deal, I think this is the right thing for us to be part of and to have the conversation. We've been dilly-dallying on versions of this now for the better part of 25 years.
Since Ronald Reagan and
Right. Star Wars, SDI, BMD, now it's called Golden Dome, sure, whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, it makes sense. It's part of North American aerospace defense, and we should be part of it. And we have systems that are either coming into service or that are on the books that can integrate into the system. So that's the long answer to the question. Is he negotiating? Probably. There will be some sort of contribution that will come both in terms of capabilities that Canada will want to contribute anyway, because it's in our interest from an air defense perspective, but equally things that we might want to contribute more as a common funding model, not unlike what we do with some of the NATO things that we're part of as well.
Let me just ask you before we move on, Heather, and get you on some of the energy stuff, is how does this fit, Mark, this notion of obviously we share this part of the continent with the United States. Our defense does have to be shared and joint, however we describe it. And the Prime Minister's emphasis on joining Rearm Europe and his constant references to working with our European partners and the need to do that, and hoping some of that can be solidified in the next few international meetings, including the one here in Canada. Are they at odds? Can we do both things at once? Where's the money?
Well, okay, so Margaret's done a great job of raising a number of, I would call them how concerns, and I think this is really the essence of the scale and scope of the challenges that the government is trying to wrestle with. How are we going to do all these things? I don't know where the money's going to come from, so in the interest of expediency, I'll just park that for the moment. To the essence of your question, they are not mutually exclusive, and in fact, I would argue that they're complementary, and I think it's important that we understand how.
Explain that.
So if we look at Golden Dome as simply the latest iteration of an integrated North American defense system, and it's more than just aerospace defense, but let's just keep it simple. Then it comes down to how you integrate a whole series of different systems. They could be sensors, they could be networks, they could be aircraft, they can be missiles, they can be all of these things that are designed to protect our airspace. And as I said earlier, it's in our interest to be part of that. I mean, to me, this is a natural extension of our partnership as a member of NORAD, as one of the only two members of NORAD. And as it relates to Rearm Europe, that's an industrial initiative for the most part. Sure, it has a lot to do with the procurement and ramping up the economic capacity of Europe. And why I think that that's an important part of the conversation for Canada is there's opportunity there. There's opportunity for us to look at alternate sources, which has been one of the issues the Prime Minister has mentioned several times, to reduce our dependence and the vulnerability that comes from that dependence on U.S. sourced technologies and U.S. technology in
He
general.
he
And
he
we
made a
already-
big point of that yesterday, saying 75 cents of every dollar
Right.
on our defense spending and procurement goes to the U.S., and he said that can't happen.
Right. So the stuff we buy, the equipment we buy is predominantly U.S. And there's a variety of reasons for it that we don't need to get into. We've discussed them previously on other podcasts. But the bottom line is that is not sustainable, and it's not sustainable politically, and it's not sustainable from an economic vulnerability perspective, and I would argue it's not sustainable from a overall defense perspective. There are lots of amazing technologies that are available from European suppliers. They're in the midst of a huge arms buildup for their own reasons, which are we share those reasons, and I think we should be part of it. The challenge, the how, back to Margaret's intervention earlier, is but here's the problem. A lot of other countries are going to be looking to fill order books themselves. And, we can't just be switching one consumer dependence for another consumer dependence. Well, I really think the key going forward is how we onshore as much capacity as we possibly can. And that's not going to happen overnight. And that's going to mean you need the right partners. And that's why I think looking across the Atlantic and potentially across the Pacific for new partners is the right thing to do.
That makes sense. The two need to work together. So Heather, why don't you take a run at all of the things that we heard and didn't hear, because there was a speech, a lot of emphasis on the environmental side of the equation, because the Prime Minister is still balancing that in his own cabinet. He's got Mr. Hodgson, the new minister, that's saying build, baby, build. And he's got Stephen Guilbeault going, we must save the planet at all costs and keep Bill 60. There'll never be another pipeline bill in place. So what did you hear yesterday that troubled you, and what gave you comfort?
Well, the only resource sector he referenced was the energy sector. In fact, I think, probably mining and agriculture and forestry start to wonder where do they fit into this spectrum, because the focus has been on conventional and clean energy. I think anyone in this town or this part of the country has also having clean energy. We also want nuclear. We also want a lot of things. So from that perspective, it's promising that he's talking energy all the time. Obviously, there's been a tone that people are, very few conversations in the last years are now having, more engagement, more discussion, more people than they have in years, last few weeks. And so the signs are promising. Hodgson obviously said and done so far right things.
I just stop you there for a minute, Heather, because I don't know if other people can hear it, but you're breaking up. It says the internet connection is unstable. Are you guys hearing her fine? Yeah, carry on. It might just be my computer, so carry on.
Yeah, I'll just say that at some point the honeymoon period is going to end. At some point, there's going to be some trade-offs between these policies. So we is good. At some point when the action, I expect they'll be, releasing their plan or their list of projects of national interest. I heard they'll be called ponies pretty soon. And then that's where kind of the rubber will start to hit the road. And we'll know what actually is their priority, what actually they're willing to do to make us a superpower, and what was just to get us through the election.
How do you interpret that? Like, what do you they mean, the Canada, when they say Canada's going to be an energy superpower? I mean, we produce an awful lot of stuff. Our problem is getting from point A to point B to customers.
Yeah, if we aren't exporting more oil and gas, I don't know what we think energy superpower is. That's not, a one definition. That's pretty platform policy, international business 101 definition. So we do hope to see more exports. We will start seeing more. We will, for the first time, LNG exports, in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And that will be tremendous. 2 other LNG projects that are very to being either approved or FID. And so there is a ton of potential on the energy side. And I don't think they'll get in the way. And even BC has been much more supportive of those. Where that leads is what's going to happen with oil. First of all, we need another oil. We want to expand Trans Mountain. You can get another couple 100,000 barrels just by compression stations, debottlenecking, heavier tankers going through. Also, everyone wants to see a Northern Gateway. Danielle Smith has made this clear, and it's not what the political support is from either BC or
I
Ottawa.
mean, we've got Quebec kind of on both sides of there'll never be a pipe going through this province, and some other making different noise. EB in British Columbia saying, hold on here, we don't want any more. How realistic do you think this is? And the Prime Minister saying there are no pipeline projects on the table for us to approve, so we got to talk about other stuff as well.
So there is a natural gas pipeline, that is approved, and we're waiting to approve the LNG terminal Silas wants to export. So that's not exactly true. Yeah. The reality with oil, with all the ponies, all the projects of national interest, most of the things in the oil and gas sector about get out of our way, get rid of the emissions cap. We can't grow with the emissions cap. We can't grow with C69. So just get out of the way, and the sector will come in and be able to invest. In the case of the pipeline to the northwest coast, you do need government to take the lead. The well has been so poisoned on the regulatory side that it's true. A proponent want to be the first one to stick up their neck. It's already spent $1 billion, Their investors don't want to see them again going in, being on that front line. For me, it is a project of national interest. The federal government should show some leadership on that. It would be a huge win for our exports in terms of how for all this defense spending. Easiest way to pay for some things is to export another 1 million barrels and get the taxes and royalties that come from that.
It also is for healthcare and a few others.
Well. It's nurses, everything this country. Yeah.
Okay, Margaret. So let's come back to the issue that you've raised, which is A, is this doable, and B, is there the to do it with? Because one of the early comments about the Prime Minister is that a little bit, it seems, a one band. I am going to put my stamp on everything. I read it all before it goes out. And I don't know. I mean, maybe it thinks when you're governor of thinks you can be guy in charge. Run a federal government in difficult times is a whole other thing. What's your early read on that?
I think he's really a brilliant guy. In the interview he did yesterday with Cochrane was masterful. Running across so many diverse issues in a really short space of time. So he's going to be very, very focused and strategic. I think he's got to get his ministers all moving in the same direction. They've got the message with the single mandate letter that everybody's got to be on board with this plan, but the details have to come quickly, because they're going to have a budget in the early fall. They need to be doing that now. And they need, back at the time of the 9/11, when I was at Department of Finance, and I think Mark Carney was there as well, we had a star chamber of PCO, Treasury Board Secretariat and Finance to review proposals from deputy ministers focused on how you address the security at the borders, in airports, in airplanes, reinforcing airplane pilot doors, and marine security. You need a strategic process like that now to be ready for September if they want to move that quickly with a budget, and I think they should, to review all of these potential project areas, putting in place the pony process. I love that expression. Thank you for that, Heather. And I think, it's doable, but it's so tight. And whether they have the budget for it or not, I think is a huge question. And energy, frankly, is a solution to that. I'm a big believer that Canada is an energy superpower. That expression came out of the out of Natural Resources Canada to cabinet under Paul Martin, but right at the end of the Martin government. And so they accepted that and they were going to run with it, but then they lost. And so Harper was presented to him and he picked up on it and made it much bigger. Across the diverse areas of energy, Canada is a leader in virtually all of them. And I'd include renewables. And so, we can present ourselves as that to the world, and we need to get moving on pipelines because I think that is an opportunity. I like the idea of a pipeline to the Hudson Bay, maybe one in, Labrador, and certainly on the West Coast. So there are opportunities here, and that will bring revenues in to the federal coffers that will support some of these other very, very big ticket items.
The Americans have been saying this out loud forever. I mean, it's what NORAD's about, but certainly since 9/11, which is, security is number one. And Donald Trump kind of tossed it off last week, which is, what this whole thing has been about is about border security and about national security. The old statement that the Americans use, Mark, which is, security trumps trade. And that's what he's really after. The trade will come and go and we'll be in the middle of this tariff war on and off, but they are really trying to get us focused on that for all the obvious reasons. Do you read that we now are?
Well, I'm getting the right signal. However, I have concerns. I'm not sure that ideologically, I'm not sure that the political class in this country really embraces it as an important topic. I think there's an element of satisfying an external audience that is a key ingredient to their calculus. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it has to be more organic than that, and it has to be more national than that. And it goes back to one of the comments that, well, both Heather and Margaret have made, and it really comes down to this issue of dependence, interdependence, and vulnerability, and how those three concepts kind of overlap. And our vulnerability now is a political vulnerability, but it's a political vulnerability that's generated by the fact that we are not independent. And so this is where, as I listen to the rhetoric and I see some encouraging signals, I perhaps naively would like to believe that we're actually going to adopt this as a national mantra because we need to. It's not unlike the comments Heather made about energy security and energy independence. This is all interconnected, and so yes, it does. And you know the American political class very well, and this is a long-standing source of annoyance to them. I think the Prime Minister is saying the right things and doing the right things. There's some serious accounting that has to take place, as Margaret has laid out. And I'm a little concerned about how we're going to get where we need to go. And throwing a lot of money at this, although it will satisfy the external audience, isn't necessarily the smartest way to do this. So we need to be smart, and that means we need to be careful. And I'm not sure that a government bureaucracy that's under enormous pressure to get a whole bunch of things done quickly is going to necessarily have the wherewithal to make the right decisions. Now, I'm not looking for a perfect solution. That would be naive. But I think there's a lot of risk in this as we go forward.
The other issue, and I guess it's just context, which is throughout the campaign, the crisis mindset worked. And that is what the Liberals employed, and it was elbows up and we're going to keep Trump at bay and all of those kinds of things. It's hard for him to reestablish, to say, as they did in the throne speech, that we're about to have a new and improved transformational relationship with the U.S. and other partners, and still keep everybody in the crisis mindset that is necessary to drive the bureaucracy, to drive the politics in this country, to do things in really short order. So it's how do you balance those things, Mark? Just a quick word on that, and we'll go around the table.
Yeah, well, I think the way you laid it out is really smart. Let's be quite crass here. They brilliantly exploited an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that in the grand scheme of things. Now it's a matter of figuring out what the new normal is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
There is going to be a new normal. As we've discussed previously in their panel discussions, this isn't about one single individual in the White House. This is about
right.
redefining relationship with our closest defense and economic partner, and it will be a constructive relationship that both sides can say, hey, you know what, this looks good. The latter half of this decade and going forward is going to be good for both of us. I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but it's going to work out. But that's not a crisis.
Exactly. That's the point. I mean, we are going to have this relationship with the United States. We're joined at the hip. There's no choice. So it's hard to play that game twice, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Heather, what are your thoughts on that? How you keep the crisis focus with the reality that, you know, we're not really in crisis anymore. Not sure we ever really were in a crisis, to Mark's point, but that we're not today.
Yeah, well, certainly from, I think, the resource sector, the business sector, it's the complacency in this country that's been killing us.
Right.
And at least Trump did us the favor of pulling us out of complacency. And even now you're starting to get some commentary of, you know, maybe we don't need a pipeline, you know, or from not only from EV, but from some Globe Mail opinion writers. And you just think, God, are we really going to walk into the situation again where we just, again, because we're not, as you say, in crisis, that we're not going to move the needle. But I would say from my perspective, I think from the perspective for a lot of people out here is the business community will step up, and there are some opportunities out there to be had, not only in energy and defense, in several other sectors, in some auto manufacturing, that the regulation and the bureaucracy is what's in the way. And so we don't need government to do something. We need government to do less. We need government to step back and allow them to thrive and allow them to compete and allow them to prosper. So that should be easier to do than having government do some big thing. It's just to step back.
Well, I know you've been writing about this. I know you've got a new report coming out, which we're going to talk about on another day. But this whole notion of we're from the government and we're here to help is always really problematic, and that has led to a lot of the issues, including Western alienation and the concern when you have the regulatory process like Bill 69 restricting pipelines, or Bill 48, or just approval processes in general. It's counterintuitive to we need to become more productive and have more economic activity.
It's definitely tamped down investment, tamped down projects, absolutely 100% in many different ways. One promising thing that's come out of Carney is to say that we're going to move to a 2-year approval process, fast track some things. I think we should fast track everything. You know, our economy needs more productivity, needs more projects. Everything to me is a project of national importance. If we can make it easier for some projects, let's make it easier for everybody. But that, I guess, is the point. There has been a lot of duplication. There has been a lot of replication in processes. It is not contributing value to the Canadian taxpayer. It is not contributing value to the proponent. So let's unwind some of that, bureaucracy that would put in place, and frankly, the federal overlay onto provincial jurisdiction that has left proponents without a line of sight on how they're going to get a project approved.
Yeah, for sure. Margaret, to you, because you've talked to, sorry, Mark, jump in if you want.
I just wanted to pick up on something Heather said,
Yeah.
Senator, and just to put an idea out there. I think what would be very helpful in the context of all of the pressures that we're discussing right now is if the government was smart enough to pick a few flagship initiatives that they could force through whatever the decision-making process is they have to force through, whether it be a infrastructure program, a pipeline, a defense program, whatever it happens to be, just to demonstrate to not only the shareholders, the voters, but more importantly to the machinery of government and to those who are watching, that we can actually change the way we do business. It's kind of one of these things. Just pick a handful across those key sectors that we've identified as being important, and just ram them through, and then show how it can be done. If I was offering advice, that would be my advice.
No,
but I don't want to steal Margaret's time. Sorry.
And I think that's what we're waiting to see from the Premier's meeting too with the Prime Minister, which is, can they get these borders, the restrictions on cross-border trade internally? Can we even do that one? Margaret, just talk for a minute too about the crisis mentality, because you've referenced it, 9/11. When we went through the pandemic, we watched government operate at, warp speed. Things can happen if government wants them to happen. But as we lose this crisis focus and the campaign focus, that's going to be harder to do.
It will be, but I think there's enough going on so many fronts that we will see a lot of progress. I really like Mark's idea of picking some flagship projects. I think that's early wins is really good to demonstrate that this is important and this will work. I think the premiers will be key to all of this.
Yep.
I'm really pleased to see how they've come together in the last couple of months. And in the face of the Donald Trump challenges. And I think Carney would do well to keep that going. They'll be really critical to the big infrastructure and energy projects. And I know that the price tag will be high, that they'll be putting things on the table and expecting the federal government to write checks, which from what we heard yesterday isn't going to happen automatically. The Prime Minister says maybe one or two things, these things will need some federal funding, maybe not. That's not the expectation of the premiers. The other thing I would flag is I think it's important to build into these processes the Indigenous role. Because in many, many cases, and the Prime Minister mentioned critical minerals yesterday, this is their land. And they need to have a role. There are Indigenous organizations that are proactively engaging to build the roads in the Ring of Fire.
Yep.
Because
he's up there, the Indigenous access to money to participate in these projects, right?
Doubling from 5 billion to 10 billion.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
That was a surprise, and I think that's a great idea. But they do need to have a role because they do. I mean, it's their land, so that needs to happen early, not at the tail end of a process. We're going to have a lot of problems if that isn't dealt with sensitivity.
Yeah. Is Mark, I'm just going to come back to you. Is there one thing in your world, the defense world, that could be one of those, let's just get it done and put it in the window and show that it's doable? Is there, Donald Trump talks about having the Golden Dome done by the time his tenure comes to an end. Like, I'm not sure how realistic that is. And some of the projects here, is there one thing in the defense side that they could do tomorrow morning and it would show that it's possible and that it's meaningful?
Yeah, I agree with your assessment on the air defense Golden Dome. It's too many moving parts.
Yeah.
So it would be a procurement program, and you know what? I'm going to show a bias here, but I think we could blow through this submarine conversation very quickly. We're no longer debating whether we need them,
Right.
And now we have an opportunity. We know we're not buying them from the States, so I think we could do that very quickly. I mean, they're still looking at to Margaret's previous comment about the timelines, or even Heather, like 3 or 4 or 5 years to make a decision in order to get into a contract. It's like, let's look, I compel the Department of National Defense to come forward with a proposal within 9 months, or just for it. The machinery of government will respond if they are forced to do so.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like if as we saw in the pandemic, they could sign a contract or put out a new government program in 15 minutes.
Right. And so that to me is an example of something that could be done. It's not easy, and it's a lot of money. All of these programs fall in the same category. There is no low-hanging fruit in terms of the things that we need to fix. But that one, to me, that would be a forcing function, and it would demonstrate, okay, the rules have changed, the leadership has changed, we're not doing things the same way anymore. And, I think that would be a very powerful illustration of a new approach to these issues. And we can spend a significant chunk of the money in Canada if we don't mess around with bureaucratic processes around industrial benefits, et cetera, et cetera.
Heather, on the energy front, just pick a project that could get done.
Pamela, we're from Saskatchewan. It's got to be Rook I uranium mine. This has been approved by the provincial government for, I think, 2 years. It has an Indigenous consent. It's got investment. It's a hot commodity. It's literally shovel ready. And CNSC has been dragging its feet for 6 years and delaying regulatory hearings. That is why it could be constructing right now this summer if the federal government wasn't taking so long. And I'll say the 2 LNG projects on the West Coast should be go time for them too.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. So, Margaret, a signal from you on Parliament Hill right over here. What could be done? What's the message that he needs to deliver there to sharpen the focus?
Well, I think 2 things. One is projects, and the other is trade. And I think we're going to have some challenges in the next couple of months as Trump pivots from autos, which is still not at all resolved. That's right. We're just in a hiatus there. We could face a big crisis in a couple of months on that. And forestry is coming, Trump says, and dairy. So those are sectoral things that we need to get our act together on now, develop a good, strong negotiating response. The idea of protecting dairy, I think, I don't know that that's sustainable given the pressures that are going to come. Yeah. But the minister said that he's going to hang tough on that. So that'll be interesting and important to see what happens there. So we need to get our act together. We've got a very strong ambassador in Washington, and I think that's very encouraging. And Dominique LeBlanc has been having regular meetings in Washington throughout the last few weeks. That's encouraging. So I think trade and projects are the 2 areas where we need to demonstrate that we've got a sound approach.
I think we should just put you 3 in charge of a special cabinet committee to get stuff done by tomorrow, and then it would just all happen. So are you guys free for a week or 2? And
sure.
we'll send you in. Thank you so much. This is a really, really, I think, helpful and instructive conversation about where we're going now that all the pomp and circumstance has passed and the votes are tallied. And let's get on with fixing our country. Mark Norman, Senior Defense Strategist at Samuel and Associates, Vice Chief of the Defense Staff of Canada, served this country for 40 years, and you continue to do it. And thank you very much for being here today and trying to make it work out of your car. That you're a trooper for sure. Margaret McCuaig-Johnston, who is the Senior Fellow at the Institute for Science, Society and Policy at the University of Ottawa, and doing triple duty on filling in for Tasha today. Heather Exner-Pirot, Senior Fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, and she's the energy and environmental expert, as you have heard. Thank you all very much. We'll see you again very soon. And, you know, just keep on putting that advice out there for the new team to listen to. It's great. And thanks to all of you for joining us today for this podcast. We'll be back very soon with another edition of No Nonsense with Pamela Wallin.